All right. So we are in chapter 22. Okay. We're looking at the huge bubble that post World War I is going to create in our country and how we're going to react to some of the changes in the world. All right. Um, and eventually get to the Great Depression in the same chapter. All right. So let's start with racial strife because it's happening. There is an increase in violence against African Americans. So African Americans are returning from war. They're continuing that northward migration, all right, and it's going to result in increased racial tensions, right? So remember what I said, okay? The South legislates, they pass laws, all right, about races and certain roles and where they can and can't go and what they can and can't do. The North simply lives by customs, okay? And so it's just the expected way of how things are going to be working. All right, it's the unwritten navigation that these African Americans in the Great Migration have to try to walk through and figure out. So we are going to have an increase in lynchings during this time period. This is post World War One. So African Americans are going to be returning from war. They're going to be in their uniforms, and this is going to outrage whites to such a point that they're going to lynch them. So we are going to have an increase in lynchings. Okay. In the South, blacks are going to begin arming themselves, which will then lead to white people retaliating by burning houses and attacking citizens. Remember, there's no police intervention because the police tend to be a member of the KKK or sometimes the head of the KKK in these southern towns. All right, so in the North, okay, tensions are also increasing. So at the time we're joining World War I, okay, we have a race riot in St. Louis. And then at the end of World War I, we have another one in Chicago in 1919. This one involving a young boy who was swimming in the waters and then crossed over into the white designated waters, leading to a bunch of people stoning him to death. So we will look at that one a little bit more in class. All right. So we're also going to just, eat away at labor rights. Okay. So we're going to have an increase in strikes because of the conditions. But then what the companies are going to do is they're going to hire minorities to break the strikes. Remember what we talked about in class? To break the strike and cross that line is to become an enemy of the people on strike who are in the union and have those jobs. So to hire minorities, you're creating and fueling the racial tensions that already exist there. This anti-union also goes for public employees. So in 1919, the Boston police force is going to go on strike for conditions and wages. Governor Coolidge, who know that name because he's going to become a president soon, he's going to fire the whole force. He's just going to fire them all and hire new, which obviously results in union membership falling because why would you join a union if you could just get fired like that? So then we're going to get something called welfare capitalism. And the idea is if a company can offer you things that takes care of you and your family, you will have more loyalty to that company and you will work there for a longer period of time. Okay, so people like Ford, all right, are going to offer health insurance. They're going to offer pensions, athletic facilities, paid vacations, things like that, okay, in order to woo people to work for them and then stay with them. Because if you were to leave that job, you would then lose your health insurance, your pension, your vacation. So there's a loyalty there. There's also a power dynamic that's going to be created because most of these people are also anti-union. So the idea is join the union and you lose these things, stay independent of the union, you can have these things. All right, so now remember in World War I, we have the Bolshevik Revolution that happened over in Russia. Okay, communists took over the country. We hate communists because they're not democratic. They don't worship God. We just don't like communists. They're bad. So we're going to keep an eye out for anybody that we think might be a communist or a Russian sympathizer. Okay, many immigrants coming into America do identify during this period as a socialist, not as the current modern era definition of socialism, but the true idea of socialism, which is just that everybody works together and the government gives some help because you pay more into it. So not what we think today as far as healthcare. A little bit different. All right, so to counter our fear, right, because we hate the communists, which is called the Red Scare, we're going to have something called the Palmer Raids. So Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer, you need to know him. Okay, he's going to establish an anti-radicalism division in the FBI. Okay, so J. Edgar Hoover, who already hates so many different types of people, is going to totally be on board with this. All right, and what it leads to is that you don't need a warrant. You just know that somebody's been accused of being a communist sympathizer, so therefore you can just go and arrest them. Okay? All right. During the height of this whole we hate communists and socialists, May 1920, we are going to have sort of an infamous trial. It's going to be against Sacco, who's a shoemaker, and Vanzetti, who's a fish peddler. They're going to both be arrested in Massachusetts for holding up and murdering a couple. Okay, they are self-proclaimed anarchists. They are going to be convicted, sentenced to death, despite a huge lack of evidence. So basically, somebody said they saw somebody wearing a bowler hat coming out of a house. And the police arrested these two guys and said, well, one owns a bowler hat, so it must have been them. So, not a lot of evidence on that one. A little circumstantial. But basically what it is evidence now in hindsight, in history, is that there was a clear bias against basically immigrants, okay, people who didn't believe in democracy and capitalism. So we prosecute them and then we executed them. So that they become martyrs for the idea that the Red Scare might be getting a little out of control in our country. All right, so let's look at women in politics. We're going to have something called the Shepard-Towner Federal Maternity and Infancy Act. This is kind of big, okay? It's going to provide federal money for clinics for prenatal education, okay? So it's going to basically kind of just help with you getting the care you need before having children, okay? It's going to end in the late 1920s, but it does last for a little bit. And then we're going to have the Equal Rights Amendment. So Alice Paul worked super hard with Lucy Burns to get the 19th Amendment passed. It passed. Lucy Burns went off to go live the rest of her life being a housewife, pretty much. And Alice Paul said, heck no, I'm going for the Equal Rights Amendment. So she's going to seek out a constitutional amendment that gives equal rights to men and women. Many people object to this, and she pretty much lives out her life fighting for this. Then we're going to have the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. This is going to be Jane Addams' baby. She's going to found this. We're also going to get one of the first women voted in to Congress, Jeanette Rankin. She was voted in pre-World War I. She was the only dissenting vote saying, no, we should not go to World War I. She did lose her seat in re-election, but she joined up with the International League for Peace and was a proud member for quite some time. So when she was back in the House during World War II, she again voted no. But this time, people didn't hate her for it. So, all right. So the Peace League for Peace and Freedom is going to be around for a while. Okay. All right. So let's look at pretty much business and what's going on. We're going to have Warren Harding. He's an Ohio senator. He's going to promise normalcy. He's going to win in a landscape. He's going to nominate this guy, Herbert Hoover, as Secretary of Commerce. Hoover is actually going to do a lot of good things under the Secretary of Commerce. So then Harding's going to die of a heart attack, which is going to reveal several scandals going on under his administration. One of which is called the Teapot Dome scandal. And you need to know it, because the Secretary of Interior, Albert Fall, right, who was really just simply a poker buddy of Harding's, he had no knowledge of anything at all that had to do with being Secretary of Interior. He's going to lease out federal land in Wyoming to friends who own oil businesses, and then he's going to take a bunch of kickbacks on that. All of that illegal. So the Teapot Dome scandal is going to be publicized. Harding's going to pretty much go down as not a good guy. All right. So then we're going to get what? Calvin Coolidge. Remember that guy who fired all of the Boston police force? Neat. He's now going to come in. He was the VP. He's going to become the P. He wants limited government. He is a total isolationist and sees no need in being involved in world affairs. He is all about business, so he's going to cut all taxes for them that he can. And he dislikes the progressive movement, so he does not enforce any antitrust laws whatsoever. He's cool. All right. And then we're going to have something called dollar diplomacy. I mean, if we offer you money, won't you be our friends? So, foreign affairs, we're going to loan money to foreign nations in exchange. Governments are going to insure the loan with military force if needed. Okay, so the U.S. Marines are going to occupy Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, and Haiti. All right, this is going to begin as a force to repay some of these loans. Okay, so we'll give you money, then we occupy you. You either pay us or else. Pretty neat. Critics are going to denounce these loans and military intervention. Okay. African Americans are going to criticize the involvement in Haiti because remember, Haiti, first slave rebellion, actually succeeded, governed, run, and overseen by a Black majority from that point until current times, even. Okay, so African Americans are going to criticize this. Then there's going to be calls for isolationism after World War I. Okay. It kind of forces them to defend this dollar diplomacy thing because, that's kind of imperialistic that we're out there occupying these places, loaning them money, overseeing what they do, and kind of controlling them to some extent. So let's look at prohibition. All right. Remember Lyman Beecher? Yeah. Okay. It's finally happening. It's here. Okay. We're going to get the 18th Amendment. All right. Because mostly those Germans and Irish people are unpatriotic and they just sit around and drink, and we need to get this ratified. So it is going to pass in 1917, ratified in 1920. All right. Prohibition goes against manufacturing, sale, and transportation of liquor, which leads to a huge boom, all right, in the underground bootlegging movement, which will fuel mobsters. Though we romanticize them, they are rather violent and nasty people. So, prohibition, no more drinking, huge increase of crime. I don't know. All right, evolution in the schools. So here we go. I mean, do you teach it? Should you teach it? The Bible is the law, people. And so there's going to be this law passed. It's called the Butler Law in Tennessee, forbidding the teaching of Darwin's theory of evolution in schools. There's going to be this guy who's going to try to challenge that. It's going to lead to a trial. Okay. So the Scopes trial is going to pretty much challenge this law. At some point, the U.S. Constitution does get involved in some of these because many states have these. This trial is going to say, you shouldn't teach it, but it's kind of a ridiculous law. So you're guilty of teaching it. But then eventually, Tennessee does take the law away. And Scopes never does pay his $100 fine. So there you go. The Scopes trial, you should definitely have that in your notes, and we'll read more about it in class. And then why not just have nativism? Because it's happening. It's there. Catholics, Jews, we don't like them here in America. Coolidge, right? America must be kept American. So he also didn't like those people. The idea was that immigrants undermine Christianity. They import socialism and communism and anarchism, and they're just horrible people, and we hate them. Okay, so we're going to begin restricting immigration in 1929. Okay, we're going to institute a quota system on Western Europe, Asia, and Mexico. Here's just a fun map of the governors who were elected that had Klan support, U.S. senators who were elected with Klan support, major areas of Klan violence. I don't know, take note of Colorado there. Our state, we have a governor in the 1920s by the name of Stapleton. Maybe you know his name due to current events going on. And then we have 2 U.S. senators who are going to be elected also with strong Klan support. So something to keep in mind. Take note of Illinois and Ohio and Pennsylvania. States having major areas of Klan violence. You wouldn't normally think, right? But there they are. Okay, then we're gonna get this movie, Birth of a Nation, 1915. Oh my. Available on YouTube if you would like to go watch parts of it, but pretty much celebrates the Klan as the heroes of saving the South, Christianity, and the virtue of all white women. So, okay, it portrays Reconstruction as a horrible disaster of black men just reaping um, money away from the white populations, attacking white women, just being horrible monsters. And then here comes the white hooded KKK coming after them and saving the cities, saving the white people, saving the women. So, needless to say, the membership of the KKK is going to increase. It also is helpful that the president at the time, 1915, remember that's Woodrow Wilson, is going to preview this movie in the White House, and he's going to give note that, wow, so accurate a portrayal of the South this movie is. So, Wilson, torn about how I feel about him. Okay, so they're going to target Jews and Catholics, the KKK. A lot of these guys are going to run for offices, right? And they're going to get more than 3 million members at its heights, and they're a family organization. So children, men, women, young, old. This is a Klan wedding in DC. Yeah. All right. So then in 1928, we're going to have another election. It's going to be Governor Al Smith up against Herbert Hoover. Remember, he was the Secretary of Commerce. He came out unscathed from the Harding Coolidge administration. He actually was a pretty big economic hero. And take note that Governor Al Smith is a Catholic. And remember, we just don't like Catholics. So Hoover won 58% of the popular vote. All right. Look at that. Thanks for coming out, Smith. He pretty much got those states because he had a D at the end of his name, and the South is still all about Democrats. Okay, all right. So then we're going to get the North. Harlem is going to become like the cool place to hang out. Okay, the 1920s are happening. Langston Hughes, Claude McKay, Gene Toomer, Zora Neale Hurston. These people are documenting Black folklore, writing songs. They're celebrated. Jazz is going to be huge. This is visible all over Harlem. All right, it's going to start in New Orleans before World War I, and then it's going to move with the Great Migration. It's going to also merge into the blues and ragtime, all these other forms of music. Okay, Louis Armstrong is going to be like just the guy off of this. All right. It's produced for Black audiences. It's made for Black audiences, but the 1920s brings about a white audience for the jazz movement. So we are going to kind of have a shift of who goes to these clubs, like the Cotton Club in Harlem. So one of these other things that's going to happen is we're going to have this guy, Marcus Garvey. Okay, he's going to establish the Universal Negro Improvement Association. All right, he was born in Jamaica, and he advocates Black separatism, right? So the idea is that whites should live in one place, Blacks should live in another place, and really, frankly, time has shown no need to merge. Okay. So he's going to publish a book, all right, basically talking about how he wants to create a steamship company that brings Blacks back to Africa. So he wants to go back to Africa. Pan-Africanism is kind of what it's called, the idea that people of African descent have a common destiny. They should cooperate in political action, all right, and they should go back to their homeland, okay? And that was from a Black man, so Marcus Garvey is Black, and this is his philosophy. W.E.B. Du Bois of the NAACP is actually going to be a fan of this for quite some time. So something to just kind of know for a while there. All right, post-World War I, we are going to have something called the Lost Generation. And this is really just all of those poor guys that went over and fought the war and came home. Yeah, well, World War I was horrible. So they saw horrors there that they had never seen before. They came back maimed and emotionally in a place that nobody had ever really been before. So this is where we really get PTSD first kind of coming into effect. We're going to get people, they're going to leave America. They're going to go to France. They're going to pretty much, the Lost Generation is going to settle in Paris, and they're going to write books, and they're going to challenge the involvement in wars. Okay. Gertrude Stein is going to call those who survived the war the lost generation. So she's the one that coins the name. All right. One of the famous things that is going to come out of this population is Ernest Hemingway. He fought in World War I. He's going to write a book called A Farewell to Arms. He was seriously impacted by the war. All right. And this dark side kind of keeps going. All right. We're also going to have F. Scott Fitzgerald. He's going to publish The Great Gatsby in 1925. Right, where he's going to criticize the pursuit of pleasure and wealth, right? So remember that as you read The Great Gatsby. I think usually as juniors, that's what you read. So yeah, the green light, so much symbolism. All right, then we're going to have corporate monopolies, okay? Here's the idea. Corporations were the major form of businesses. We're going to merge, all right, between all of these different groups. Wall Street is going to be the financial center of the U.S. Post-World War I, we're going to have a little bit of an inflation, all right, followed by 2 years of a recession, all right, with 10% unemployment. Okay, so a little bit of an economic up and down there. All right, but despite the boom, the economy did have a weak agricultural sector due to falling prices. The idea was farmers fed World War I. They fed Europe, they fed America, they fed everybody. The war is over. Europe doesn't need us anymore. What do these farmers do? Okay, they mortgage themselves, they double mortgage themselves, they bought all this new technology. And now the banks are going to say, hey, pay up, and they can't. Okay, so they're not going to benefit from any of these booms. All right, they're actually going to suffer. What is going to benefit is the automobile. Mass production is going to lead to Americans spending $2.58 billion on automobiles in 1929. Okay, if you buy automobiles, what else happens? Steel goes up, petroleum goes up, chemicals go up, rubber goes up, glass. I mean, it just keeps going. Okay, so all of these industries are going to be part of the boom. Okay, and thank goodness eventually we get lines on roads and actual parking lots, because that looks a little too much for me. All right, but we're also going to have Hollywood to entertain us. Okay, this is where we're going to get fashion. All right, today I don't know where you get your fashion ideas. I don't know if it really comes from Hollywood, but in the 19 teens and 20s, Hollywood set the tone. All right, that's where they got it all, including the flappers. Flappers are going to come from Hollywood, and women are going to adopt it everywhere. They're going to cut off their hair, cut their skirts short, and show their shoulders. It's a big deal. All right, so here's the problem. We lent out too much money. Okay, we're going to experience a drop in consumer spending as credit is going to become more difficult. We're going to have some other effects. So during the first 4 years, all right, industrial production is going to fall 37%, construction, all right, unemployment's going to raise, all right, all of these things are huge, huge problems for us, okay, and African Americans are going to be affected deeply, okay. Banks are going to go under because banks were just lending money out. They didn't have a reserve in their vault anymore. So they just didn't have a way to pay for anything. So they had to call in all their loans. People couldn't afford to pay those loans, which is why there was huge foreclosures on farms, all right, property, equipment, things like that. So take a look at this, all right, graphic here. The idea is this, okay? We're going to have all this prosperity, and then all of a sudden we're going to have this crash, okay? Which means that we're going to have a loss of profit, okay? Which is going to go into, right, less demand, all right? Which is going to, if there's less demand, we're going to start cutting prices, all right? Well, if we're going to start cutting prices and we can't afford to produce as much, so we're going to have less production. Well, if we can't produce as much, then we're going to have to lay some people off, so we have less employment. All right, if we have done all of that, now there's less money in the circulation, all right, which means that banks have less credit, okay, which means that there's less building going on, which means there's even more unemployment, which means there's even more lack of demand, okay, and all of this is going to result in a huge depression. So here is just the unemployment rate from 1915 to 1945, okay? This being, all right, the Great Depression right here. So 1930, all right, to arguably kind of right in this area. So if you look here, All right, we did reach a high of 23.6, 24.9. All right, and then we're going to go down, and then we're going to have a boom again. All right, and then we're going to go to war, which is going to help us level it off. All right, guys, that was a lot. So update your big ideas, get a bunch of this stuff in there. You definitely are going to want to make sure that you have your Supreme Court case updates, because you're going to need to know a case from this chapter and talk about it. Remember the Scopes trial, the increase in KKK, things like that. We're going to go over in class a little bit more, but update your big ideas, get this stuff in there. All right, and the next chapter we're going to pick up with World War II. All right, so until next time.